Hey, today I'm going over even more suits in the Fiskheroes mod. Today is the Tier 2 suits. There's, again, 3 suits. I promise next time there will be more. But this time we only have 3 once again. And an alt. And again, we will be beginning with Doc Ock. And to remedy something I messed up last time, I will also show the fabricator and the database that is required for him. For the fabricator, he needs 28 Tetridium in order to craft. And in the database, he needs Loop 1, which can be gotten through unlocking a Tier 1, Melee 2, Object Manipulation, Traversal 2, and Spider-Man Raimi. To be gone over in the Tier 7 video. Some details with the suit before I go over the powers is the coat, just like Rip Hunter and Captain Cold, can go down to your legs, but unlike those two, it does not affect the hat layer. Instead, it only affects the chest and legs, which, just like Cold and Rip, allows you to see details when you take off the coat, although the pants are not very detailed on Doctor Octopus. He deals 3.5 punch damage and has 2.5 fall resistance. And all tier 2s this time have 80.8% damage reduction. The factor game rule, with the factor game rule, it takes the damage reduction of suits above tier 1 is not entirely set by the damage reduction. However, it is influenced by it. For example, if I set the damage reduction baseline to 1%, you notice it changes. So how you change the actual tiers above tier 1 without changing tier 1 is there's another rule called damage reduction factor. By default, it is 1.3, but it can be set to anything. 1.1, 2, which after that didn't change much, but either way, 1.5, anything. The rule takes the baseline and it takes the missing percentage, so by default, tier 1 is 75% damage reduction. So it takes that 25% that you still take damage from, divides it by 1.3 to get, in this example, 19.23%. And then you take that 19.23, and then you take 100 and minus it by that to get 80.77. But that then rounds up to 80.8 damage reduction for the base suit, as the game rule rounds up or down depending on the value. And in case you're still confused, here is the game rule. Here is the math formula for how it all calculates. If you want to check it, just note that it affects all tiers, not just tier 2. Hence why I'll only be going over it with Doc Ock. And for the future, only Doc Ock. I will have this video linked in the description of other videos, though, for people to double check what it is, and have the formula at the start of those videos as well. Now, for Doc Ock, you notice he doesn't have any powers other than you notice he doesn't really have any abilities up here at the top until you toggle the tentacles, which activate them. There is 4 tentacles, and they each can act individually at any time. You don't need them all to instantly recharge to do things, but you need all 4 to be available to do things. They're independent of each other, however, they themselves need to be independently at the ready to do things like attack or climb. Now, first move we can see is the Tentacle Jab, which firstly can break things like glass, glowstone, all of those soft blocks that things like guns can also destroy. Additionally, this move can be spammed so long as you have a tentacle at the ready. Okay. With the tentacle grab, if you are not looking at an entity when it hits, if it does not hit an entity, it does nothing. However, once like for example, it did not break glass or anything. But if you hit an entity, it allows you to pick them up and control them, letting you look anywhere and do anything with them. However, if they attack the tentacle, then they can break out of it, which also damages you. It doesn't matter how far away they are from you. If they attack the tentacle, they break out of it and deal some slight damage to you. Roughly, I believe, half of the punch damage. I may be wrong there, though. So, if anyone wants to correct me on that, feel free to. The next to last ability he has is the Tentacle Strike. If I just tap it, it does nothing. But if I let it hold, a blade appears, which allows it to deal additional damage. A lot of damage. Causing it to be able to deal high damage. However, due to the long charge up, it is a little difficult to prepare. It also cannot destroy it can also destroy glass and such, just like the jab. Essentially making it a stronger but slower tentacle jab. The final ability for Doctor Octopus is that, with the tentacles, he is able to climb, which allows him to move around much faster, essentially giving him creative flight. However, as you might have just noticed when I was activating it, it has a limited range, and your tentacles need to be on a surface to be able to climb. For example, I can climb up this building. However, if I begin to jab, and I don't have any tentacles on the wall, I cannot climb. Or if I go too high and they can't reach, I again stop climbing. Making it so you actually have to be near a block or entity. Well, not entity, that's my bad. Making it so you have to be actively near a block in order to climb. You also are able to climb with a entity, it's just you can then not use that tentacle as it is holding the player, so it makes it so you have even less room for error with the climbing due to missing a tentacle. The same holds true with a strike as well. You can charge it while you're climbing. It's just you do not have access to that tentacle for the climbing. This is what allows Doctor Octopus to be such a mobile suit. Without climbing, he would not be very mobile. However, he does also have augments, as all suits do. So, the augments that Doctor Octopus has access to are as follows: damage reduction, punch damage, weapon damage, jump height, fall resistance, and sprint speed. The only available option under Iron is damage reduction, which increases it by 1.745%, putting him at 82.545%, which is vastly different from the Tier 1 suits, as the tiers have different damage reduction values in the augments. Under Gold, we have damage reduction again, which puts it up to 3.2%, putting it at a clean 84%. He gains 1 punch damage, putting him at 4. 1 fall resistance, putting him at 3.5, which is 8.5 blocks before fall damage. And a 10% sprint speed buff, just making him slightly faster, but still incredibly slow compared to others, without climbing. Then again, we have damage reduction, which maxes out at 4.431% for 85.231% damage reduction. An additional weapon punch damage, 0.5 weapon damage, which is his max. 0.5 jump height, letting him jump a block and a half. Again, fall distance and sprint speed as well, for 9.5 blocks and 20% sprint speed, maxing the sprint speed out as well. And lastly, under Vibranium, I believe lastly. Okay, just gonna redo that, because I don't know if this is lastly. Next up, under Vibranium, we have again punch damage, putting him at 6.5 damage. 1 jump height for a whole 2 blocks of jump instead of just the 1.5. And again, 3 fall resistance for 10.5 blocks. And he has a single Dwarf Star upgrade, that being fall resistance. Putting him at 11.5 blocks he can fall before fall damage begins to occur. Setting him to be a little mobile, but not as mobile as some other suits in the mod. Giving him some moderate mobility, but still somewhat lackluster on the ground. And that is all there is to see with Doctor Octopus. The next suit to show is Doctor Strange. He has 1.5 punch damage, 2 weapon damage, 0.5 jump height, and 3.5 fall resistance. This is, I believe, the only suit in base that has more weapon damage than it does punch damage by default. In the database, Doctor Strange has Defense 2, Flight, Group 1, Melee 1, Ranged 2, and Sorcery. And he costs 30 Tetritium to craft. Additionally, under his powers, he has the Cloak of Levitation, which allows for controlled flight, which allows you to fly so long as you are holding a movement key and going in that direction. Additionally, a feature unique to Strange in the cloak is if you stop flying or fall a certain amount of blocks and are not flying, it automatically makes you fly again. As it automatically begins flying for you instead of having to double tap space to fly. Even if you are not flying beforehand, it automatically makes you fly, causing you to not have to worry if you jump off of a building or anything, as it will automatically begin to fly. Some details with the suit itself are, when you are stationary, obviously, the cloak is flowing, making it just look a little more visually pleasing. Additionally, with the suit, when you're walking, the cloak also flares out, making it look more alive and actually responding to the wind, unlike some other capes, which do not flare out, at least not nearly as much as the cloak. Additionally, the underside of the cloak has its own unique texture, which looks like this. Additionally, when the suit, like Doctor Strange, like Doctor Octopus, Captain Cold, and Rip Hunter before them, with the chest plate, it affects the other parts of the skin. With the robe going down over the legs, and the collar of the cloak going over the player's head. And, you might notice, it has a model for the ends of the collar, making it flare out even more at the ends, making it just visually more interesting instead of just a flat texture on the side of their head. But like before, if you just take off the robes, you can see details underneath the cloak, underneath the robes that are not visual, are not visible otherwise. Although it is mostly just a mess of really dark blues. But it is a detail that is visible nonetheless. Additionally, the other ability he has is Eldritch Magic. This gives him a shield that, if you right-click, blocks all attacks coming from the front. However, it does not block attacks from the side. Okay. So, the shield also has 100 health, so it takes 100 damage to break it. So it only blocks from the front. So if I look to the side, he can still hit me. But if I have him even slightly in my view, it automatically blocks his attacks. Additionally, as I said before, if he deals 100 damage, he is able. If the shield takes 100 damage, it is able to break. I give you a suit. So, for example, if I give him Batman, and he hits, and he just continuously punches me, you can notice the health bar of the shield going down on the right with that little icon. And when it eventually breaks, it automatically disables the shield, causing the UI to flash until it begins to regenerate, and bringing it back up to full slowly, and allowing it to block attacks once more. Additionally, if I hold left click instead of right click, he begins to aim, allowing him to toggle a blade instead of the shield. Which, with that blade, he gains his 1.5 punch damage turns into 7, allowing him to deal 5.5 extra punch damage compared to before. However, as usual with the damages, it sometimes has some variation. So for that, I was dealing 8, but it does not always, as sometimes it can deal less, or sometimes it can deal 7 like it did there. Additionally, when he does not have the shield toggled, he has the spell menu ability, which opens up this UI. You have access to Duplication Spell, Whip Spell, Earth Swallowing Spell, and Atmospheric Spell. Starting with the most simple one, the Earth Swallowing, as it is not able to combo with any other spells. For this, you click W, W, A, D, S, and W. And then, all mobs you're looking at get lifted and then slammed into the ground, dealing roughly 14 or 15 damage. I hear you. It then takes roughly 30 seconds to recharge, with no way to speed it up. Next spell to cover is Duplication. To activate this, you press A, D, A, D, A, S, W, A, and D. When looking at an entity, it then creates 6 duplicates surrounding that entity. It can only affect one entity at a time, so for this example, only Wild. These duplicates are able to cast certain spells along with you. However, and they copy all your visuals, including your cape visual, your suit visual, your skin, your blades, anything. However, they only have one singular health, and they are locked to only following the player they are duplicating around. They're behind you. However, they are not limited to only doing that, as they are able to duplicate also the whip and atmospheric spells. First, I will go over them without the duplicates. For the whip spell, you simply press W, S, S, D, and S. This attaches the whip to the player, and if you left-click, it pulls them towards you, which can slingshot them in a direction which could be unfavorable for them, such as off of a building. Okay. Alright. The next spell is the quickest spell to cast, the Atmospheric spell. Simply press A, W, D, and S. Deals some decent damage, however, it recharges extremely quickly, only taking roughly a second. However, both of these spells can stack on top of the duplicates. So, all of them also shoot out a whip, which stacks the damage on top of the player you're aiming at. Which goes for both whip and atmosphere, causing it to deal extreme damage. For example, I almost one-shot him. And when the entity you're targeting dies, all of your duplicates also die instantly. And just like with Rip Hunter, the Eye of Agamotto alt is available at all times and is not locked behind an achievement, allowing you to change it at any time so long as you have an iterator. And just like before, they have the exact same stats as normal Doctor Strange, the Eye of Agamotto alt. Additionally, the augments that Doctor Strange has are the following: damage reduction, punch damage, weapon damage, jump height, sprint speed, and max health. For Iron, he only has damage reduction, which increases the same amount as Doctor Octopus did. For Gold, he has, again, damage reduction, but also weapon damage, which puts it at 2.5, and jump height, which puts it at 1, which is 2 blocks of jump. Then, Gold Titanium, he has access to all but sprint speed. For damage reduction, it puts it to 4.431%, or 85.231. For punch damage, it increases by 1 to 2.5, tying with the weapon damage. However, weapon damage can be augmented again to 3. Then, jump height puts it at 1.5 blocks, so 2.5 blocks of jump until 2.5 blocks of jump. And the final augment, which is unique, which is one of the more unique augments, only available on a select few suits, is max health. This gives you an extra health point. So by default, a player has 20 health, 1 per half a heart. And if I were to put this back here, and I grab an unaugmented Strange, you can see he just has 20. But then, with the augment, he has an extra half a heart. So he has 21 health instead of simply 20. Setting him a little bit tankier, but still relatively low due to his low tier. Next up, for Vibranium, he has access to all except for jump height, as that is now maxed out. So, he gets 5.486% damage reduction, or 86.286% in total. Next up, punch damage, putting it at 3, which, by the way, punch damage also stacks on top of blades, which makes his blade now deal 11 damage. Causing his blade to deal 9 damage. And his weapon damage increases again by 0.5, tying with his base punch damage. His sprint speed increases by 10%, and he gains an extra max health, putting him at 22 health, or 11 hearts total. And finally, Dwarf Star, he has damage deduction, putting him at 6.4% or 87.2%, 20% sprint speed, and getting him 3 health, or 11.5 hearts. Putting him at the second highest max health out of any suit. However, the next suit is the highest. The final suit we are covering today is Heatwave. He, just like Captain Cold, is he is similar to Captain Cold in that his main ability is resistance and a special gun. For Captain Cold's Fabricator, he requires 12 Tetridium to craft, and in the database, he requires Defense 1, Group 1, and Ranged 1. He has 5.5 punch damage, 2 weapon damage, 2.5 fall resistance, and heat resistance, which the heat resistance gives him 50% resistance to fire, and fire immunity for 3 seconds. Which, if I grab a flint and steel and light some fire, means that while I still take damage to the fire, I don't actually get lit on fire for those 3 seconds. But if I stay in the fire for 3 seconds, I'm no longer immune and am lit on fire. Making it so he can stay in fire for a little bit of time, but not very long. Additionally, his heat resistance is 50%, just like Captain Cold, causing him to be able to resist more damage to fire than others. Is Firestorm Ronnie Raymond's Beam, which does 2 damage to him, and the Fireball deals also 2 damage to him while letting him on fire. Ronnie's Fist deals 3 damage to him. Then the Beam does 5, and the Fireball does 6. And then for Jax, he has, again, 2 damage, and for the Fireball, 3 damage. And then Heatwave takes 3 damage to the punch. And then they take 5, 6. And then for the punch, they take 7 damage. The heat gun deals 2 damage to him, while lighting him on fire for a decent bit. And then to a normal player, it deals 5, while also, again, lighting him on fire for a while. So to Heatwave, that's the wrong spell. So to Heatwave, Doctor Strange's Whip, which does fire, does 2. Meanwhile, to a player without the suit on, it deals 5. Alright, back up. And lastly is Martian Manhunter's Heat Vision, which to Heatwave it deals 3. Meanwhile, to a normal player it deals 7. Just like before with Captain Cold, the fire resistance is very effective for nullifying a lot of the damage that suits can do to you when focusing on that specific damage type. Don't mind that. Okay. And again, just like before with Captain Cold, Heatwave also has some suit things to look at. The jacket, like Cold, actually also lowers down onto the legs, although it's not as much as Cold. And it does not affect the head, unlike Cold, who it affects. But you can see details on the pants that you can't see with the coat on. Additionally, the weapon specific thing, his specific weapon is the heat gun. This, like Cold's gun, fires a 32 block range, lighting things on fire. It can light all flammable blocks on fire. So for instance, leaves, wood, not those. Basically, any flammable block is able to be lit on fire by the heat gun. However, it does not light non-flammable blocks on fire, instead basically just ignoring them. And also, unlike Captain Cold, he does not have an alternate mode when you crouch. Instead, he only has the constant beam, making him a little more predictable, but obviously at a higher tier. So, last up for Heatwave is his augments. Just like similar to Doctor Strange, he has damage reduction, punch damage, weapon damage, jump height, fall resistance, which is different, as Strange had sprint speed instead, and max health. For Iron, he has available fall resistance and damage reduction, which again increase it by the same amount. For Gold, he has damage reduction, punch damage, jump height, fall resistance, and max health, putting him at 21 health and giving him an extra half a block of jump height and putting him at 84% damage resistance. For Gold Titanium, he has access to all his augments. So damage reduction, putting him at 85%, punch damage, putting him at 7.5 damage, weapon damage, putting him at 0.5 weapon damage, or 2.5 weapon damage, sorry. An extra 0.5 jump height, putting him at 2 blocks of jump height. An extra fall resistance, being now 10.5 blocks, and an extra max health, putting him at 11 hearts. And under Vibranium, he has damage reduction, putting him at 86.286, punch damage, putting him at 8.5, weapon damage, putting him at 3, and maxing it out, jump height, putting him at 2.5 blocks and maxing it out, fall resistance, putting him at 11.5 blocks and maxing out, and max health, putting him at 11.5 hearts, and then, finally, for Dwarf Star, we have damage reduction, putting him at 87.2%, punch damage, putting him at 9.5 damage, and max health, putting him at 12 hearts and maxing him out. Setting these as his final stats, and leaving him at 12 hearts of health. And so that is the last suit for this video. Next time will be tier 3, and again, we'll actually get more than just 4 suits to video. Not even 4, it was 3 this time and last time. So we will get more next time, it's just tier 1 and 2 did not have many suits. Same with tier 9 and 10 when we get to those, but that's the future. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Goodbye.